our bosses have spoken. Doc has almost done the work for me. So what I'm just going to do is that we'll take some of the issues and tell you what the Commissioner General is going to do about things related to the tax policy, so that you are aware when we come in full force, that you know that the Commissioner General is in action. We have over 45 billion to collect. That is what we are doing. And the minister says that it's not 45, he wants to increase it. So we need to be collecting this money. And some of the things that we are going to look at, which Doc has talked about, we are going to just go over and then let you know what the Commissioner General intends to do on some of these issues. Now we know that mobilization of domestic revenue through reforms digitalization is very important, because it's going to ensure the financing and the development. We all remember what happened in the 2017 budget. Some taxes were removed. Tax, VAT on real estate, we have financial services taking off, almost 13, you could count it. All this was done so that to help the business community to grow, because they thought that there were too much taxes and felt that those taxes must go away so that they will be able to have money to look at. And that was continued in 2018. And when the 2019 budget also came, as Doc indicated, there was a review of the tax ban. When it came up, it was at 10,035. But it hit a lot of people. It hit a lot of people, and they thought that the government should do something about that. So instead of the 35%, it came down to 30%. And then the 10,000 went up to 20,000. So there was some disposable income that individuals, people felt that too much was taken away from them. But when it came down to 30% and then 20,000, there was disposable income. It looks like it was good. Nobody is complaining. We are happy, isn't it? Yes. Then the question of withholding taxes on small-scale mining, as Doc indicated. Because small-scale mining has been a problematic area. They get the gold, and then they take it away. It came down from 10%, it came down 7%, then it came to 3%. Still, we're not getting them to pay the tax. So now, what was done is that at the point of export, when you are leaving, when you have bought the gold and you are exporting, we expect that you show evidence of paying 3% of the value of the gold. So it was envisaged that PMMC will be an say, he's also going to do the valuation and then you pay the tax there. If you don't pay and you get to the port, customs point, it's going to also, if you haven't paid, show evidence. If you haven't paid, then the tax will be taken. So the modalities as to how this is going to be done would be made known, so that people know what they have to do regards to the export of gold. So withholding taxes on the small-scale miners, those we needed to get some revenue from them. So those who are export, we are expecting that the what we are looking at. Then another one that was done, but nobody talked about, is the textile industry. The textile industry has been going down, and yes. Yes, the textile industry, the local textile industry. We just have about 2 or 3, and you almost hear them on the news. So what the government has indicated that is for up to 2021, we are going to zero rate the local industry. That is when you are in the local manufacturing tax service, and you pay, you go to blue pages, and you pay VAT. Those monies will be refunded to you. Any VAT expenses that you incur will be refunded, so that cash will come into the hands of these manufacturers, so that we'll be able to manufacture. Because it looks like we are losing those in the textile industry. Then we also have the tax recovery. In fact, Doc talked about that. We have prepared dockets for people, or taxpayers who owe us and are not paying. We will be hearing a lot of court actions. So we are pleading that when the court actions come, we don't call the Commissioner General to plead for any clemency. We are going to use all the enforcement actions, the distress, the garnishing of accounts. After the garnishing of accounts, it will be done so that we'll be able to recoup the taxes, especially the products and are not being collected. Then talking about automation, I don't know whether you are dealing with our domestic taxes offices where you need to submit your returns manually. We want to step up the game, where now there will be e-filing and then e-payments, where you sit in the comfort of your home and you'll be able to file your returns and then also make payments from your homes. Instead of driving all over to a domestic tax office and then be in the queue, it's a lot of problems. So we are going to ensure that that part, at least the LTO, the Lancaster office, is going to have their returns filed. As you being professionals, we also want you to help us so that when you go out there and you get a service, demand an VAT invoice. Not just because you actually do want a VAT invoice or you want a receipt. And because you think that the VAT invoice will increase the price by 12.5%, you say, oh, give me a receipt. Let's help Madagana. We have 45 billion to collect. Let's ensure that the person issues the VAT invoice so that he properly accounts for it. And you as professionals too, if you are registering for VAT and you are issuing an invoice, please don't issue what do you call it? Ordinary receipt. Issue a VAT invoice. Because we are coming out full force. What we are going to do is that we are going to use the NAPO officers to go out and do what we call ministry pages. We say somebody, you come, give him money and you do the pages. So you give him another, what do you call it, receipt. We will take you to court. And we don't want you to be the first person to be put before court that we didn't issue it. So please, let's ensure that we do that. But to help us is the physical electronic device. This device is going to be made available to all VAT registered taxpayers, where they are going to issue the receipt or invoices from there. And immediately he issues the invoices, it hits our server in the General Revenue Authority. So even before the taxpayer comes to make a declaration to us, we already have a fair idea of how much sales he's made. In fact, we are taking it to the next level where we just download an app so that immediately you issue a receipt, an electronic receipt. It will also hit our server. And definitely we'll be able to know how much VAT you have collected and you are not declaring. And therefore, that is going to be part of our VAT penetration to ensure that those who are VAT registered are accounting for the tax and accounting rightly. They declare it and then they make the payments to us. We are going to continue with the enforcement of excise stamp. I think you've heard about how a task force is out there. Last year, they went to the breweries, they seized products, accessible products. They came to one hotel, famous hotel, just to make a point. And they seized all the products because they didn't have the excise stamp. We are going to step it up. So please, when I came, I was looking at the what do you call it? The bottle water to see whether it has an excise stamp. And I'm determined that if it hasn't got it, I'm not going to drink it. I think this is what we need to be doing to ensure that as citizens, patriotic citizens, you know that this thing attracts excise. And it hasn't got the excise stamp. And you are drinking, that means you are contributing to the state not getting a revenue, isn't it? Yes. So let us consciously make a conscious effort to ensure that we are helping to ensure that the revenue is gotten. Let's remember that it's 45 billion, and we are going to continue with the excise stamp policy. And if you hear about people who are not fixing the stamp, please let us know so that we follow up on them and get them to have that done. Otherwise, they will come quickly, we'll seize the products, and then we ensure that the right thing is done. Talking about the minimum wage as Dr. has indicated, there's no tax on that. It's beyond that we will have the tax being imposed. Now, coming to broadening of the tax net. The tax net, as you are aware, it is in the Act 915, the Revenue Administration Act. And it indicates, I'll read from the 915 so that you appreciate what the law says. In Schedule 1, it indicates which institutions who have to insist that the thing is used. Ghana Revenue Authority, Controller Accountant General Department, Registrar Department, the Registrar of Cooperatives, the Land Commission, Immigration Service, Passport Office, Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority, the courts, Ministry, Departments, Agencies, Metropolitan, Municipal, and District Assemblies, government subdivisions of government and public institutions not listed above. Persons required to withhold tax under the Income Tax Act, banks, insurance companies, and other financial institutions, manufacturing companies, and any other institution or person which the minister may by regulation prescribe. So virtually any kind of institution is covered. That you need the team to be able to transact business with these institutions. So we need to ensure that it is going to be stepped up. In fact, for the budget, it was indicated that to benefit from services from the state, you need to have a team. So please, let us ensure that before we go out there, and even I don't know whether your bankers have sent you a text. They are indicating that you need to generation is done in such a way that everybody can have it in good time. So that it doesn't look like there are queues in our offices, or it takes a long time before the thing is generated for you. So we hope that we ensure that while going out to take government contracts, while we are dealing with the bank, any transaction with the state institution, we need to ensure that you have the team. All this is part of measures to ensure that, because we need to broaden the tax base. Only a few people are paying the tax. So if others come into the net, then the tax that, but if we continue to concentrate on the very few, becomes very problematic. One city, as my Commissioner General says, if we are a population of about 25, 30, isn't it? And then 10 of it is paying one city. Who gets somewhere, isn't it? So let's make sure that we get the tax identification number, and then we'll be able to ensure that everybody pays. But with the thing, it does not necessarily mean, let's make it clear, it does not necessarily mean that we are to pay tax. I hope I'm making myself clear. Pay tax. No, it doesn't come into the picture. But at least he's known to us, and therefore when he starts getting some income, then we come into tax whatever income that is in his hands. Then the use of third-party information. This I indicated that we are going to use this a lot. Rwanda, they use data clearly. If you are an individual and you have various types of cars, high-class cars, at least you have to find out how you are able to buy fuel, isn't it? Who might tell you? If you are somebody who travels almost every, what are you doing? Are you getting what I'm trying to say? We need data. We are collecting data. The Commission General has written to some of all these institutions to get the data. A house in what do you call this place? Chasako. Or where you go to maintain it. You go to find out. You've rented it out. How much are you getting? How do you get it? So data is being collected. It's being collated. Here you get the data. Then we write to you that because you have a house in Chasako, so come and pay this amount. There will be a lot of data matching, and they will be able to have a fair idea. We will be able to assess how much you should be paying. Yeah. When you look at the financial institutions, there are a lot of, if you like going to court, always litigating, and kind of litigations that you are getting involved in. It involves land, it involves, what do you call it, houses, properties. Hey, then you are somewhere, then after the litigation finish, what do? We follow up, isn't it? We do, somebody said something, it was so funny. Judgment debt, okay. When you pay the judgment debt, the Commission General is there to see whether he can take his tax. So that's why I'm just trying to help you appreciate what will be at the courts and all that. So we are going to collect a lot of data and then do a lot of data matching and then raise a fair assessment. It doesn't mean that what the Commission General has raised as an assessment is final. If you think you have proof or evidence that the assessment that is given to you is too high, then you show evidence of that. And then you pay the appropriate taxes. We are going to force the legislation in regards to the mining sector. If there are an evaluation of royalties and profits, we are going to look at it. Then exit repatriation of foreign exchange. All these things are going to be looked at to ensure that in the mining industry, the right taxes are paid so that we are able to get the taxes that are due. Moving on, the Commission General is also to help assist in the production of property tax. It's working hand in hand with the local government to ensure that the properties are properly registered, then find a way of doing proper valuation of the properties, and then ensure that the taxes are paid. Some of us, we complain that where we live and the property rates that are being charged are so low. And even nobody is coming even to check to find out whether we pay that low amount or that's low. And nobody is coming. For the Commissioner General is going to assist in that. The NAPO are around and we'll go around finding out whether you pay the property rate. If you haven't paid, then you have to pay. And then we'll try to ensure that the right rates are given to those properties. The other one that we also talked about is the growth in the exemption. In fact, when you look at it, it was around 391 million in 2010. It had gone to about 5.27 billion exemption, giving exemptions out. And that's he explained. People who are coming in and are not paying at ports, And this is just VAT, import duty, and anything like that. And this is how fast it has risen. And it's affecting our economy. So what is going to happen is that as there is a draft policy of exemptions, it's going to be put before Parliament. Then we'll see how best we are able to reduce the exemptions. If you have to pay and come for refund, so ensure that people do not abuse that dispensation, it is properly done. Then as we are going to use the NAPCO, who are going to support us and then register potential taxpayers. So we'll be moving, they call it door to door, shop to shop, making sure that we are registered. If you don't have the thing, you'll be registered. If you don't have VAT, I mean, that is what they're going to do, so that we ensure that everybody pays this little bit, so that we are able to achieve the targets that have been given to us. I would like to end here and indicate that there's a lot that the Commissioner General is going to do, so that at least for this year, it is intensification of compliance, where everybody is supposed to file his returns. By end of March, as individuals, we are supposed to file our returns. Last year, we had the Vice President visiting our offices to file his returns. So we are expecting that each one of us, whilst we have some income that we are earning, at the end of March, then in February, we should file our returns. Even if it is, we haven't done anything, we haven't earned any income, let us file, because we'll come after you if you haven't filed, and then raise an assessment based on the Commissioner General's information that he has. And that one, to take you a lot of hours and time to disprove his assessment. Because what he has is what he is raising the assessment of. So on that note, we'd like to end here, and we know that there will be questions flying up here. We'll try to answer those questions. Thank you very much.
I'd like to take the last one. It will take hours and time to disprove. So we need to file, whether we have anything or not. Let's just file. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. All right. So we take the next presentation, and to do that for us is Mr. Abeku John Kwanzaa, PwC. Let's give it up for him.
Objectives of your institute, and the fact that you're looking at adding value to corporate activities and then introducing some professionalism into your practice. Now, before we go deep into talking about the tax implications arising from the 2018 budget, I would like to read from Section 58 of the Revenue Administration Act of 2016. And we hope this would set the proper context for our discussion over the next 20 or so minutes. So Section 58 says, where an entity fails to pay tax on time, a person who has been a manager, and by way of explanation, if the tax law talks about manager, it includes directors. So obviously, some of you may either be directors or you're hoping to join the boardroom and have that discussion. During the relevant time, is jointly and severally liable for the entity for the payment of the tax. And subsection 1 applies irrespective of whether the entity ceases to exist. So the argument cannot be, I was a board director 2 years ago, the company has come to an end, we found out that there was an issue 3 years ago, and therefore I'm absolved. No. 3 says, Section 1 does not apply only if you exercised due care, you were diligent, and then you demonstrated skill that is reasonable by a prudent person in that particular position. So obviously, having the knowledge is one of the things that may absolve you, just in case the company in which you are a board of director has been doing the wrong things as far as tax is concerned. So having established the background to my presentation, I would want us to go back and look at the theme for the 2018 budget. And the doctor from the Ministry of Finance was clear that this 2018 budget theme was looking at a stronger economy for jobs and prosperity. And he also did indicate that revenue mobilization is one of the critical things that government is going to look at in 2019. So I'm going to establish that as far as 2019 is concerned, the government of Ghana is saying that I seek to raise 58 billion cedis. However, I plan to spend 73.4 billion, which means that even before we go to the party, we're expecting to raise and finance an additional 14.5 billion. Now, coming back, out of the 58.9 billion that government intends to raise, 45% or 45 billion, as my senior colleague from the revenue has said, will be coming from taxes. And this compared to our GDP is just about 13.1%. What does it mean? If you work, I work, the companies that we work for all generate income, and we add that together, as a country, we are expecting that if we take the result of our work, and we take the taxes that we collect, and we divide the result of our work by the taxes, we're saying that for every 100 cedis, we are paying the equivalent of 13 cedis by way of taxes. Now, why is this important? This is important because, one, government would have to come to us to raise those taxes. And therefore, if government is unable to raise about 77% of its revenue from taxes, then at the end of the day, we're going to miss our revenue target of 58 billion and also miss the projections that we have in that respect. Now, one of the things that we have shared with our clients is that in December, government passed a new law known as the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2018. And what that act essentially says is that the finance minister is required ordinarily to ensure that he does not exceed or he does not have a deficit to GDP ratio in excess of 5%. Now, if he exceeds this 5%, what happens? He is subject to a vote of no confidence by our parliament. So if you are the minister responsible for finance, obviously you will keep an eye on this particular number. Now, looking at what happened in July 2018, where we were missing our revenue targets, and therefore the minister had to go back to parliament to ask for some approvals in order to introduce luxury vehicle, as to whether or not the vehicles are indeed luxury. It's an argument for another day. To introduce a 35% tax on incomes in excess of 10,000 Ghana cedis. What that essentially means is that when you work and you are fortunate enough to generate, or your employers pay you more than 10,000, it means that take a third of that and in excess of that and give it back to the government of Ghana. That's what it meant. And then finally, the VAT monster that we've all created for ourselves, which is called the VAT reconstruction, or whatever we term it, which is quite too confusing now, whether we have 17.5 or 18.125, I don't know. All of these were created. What does this mean? Going into another July 2019, if government revenues are not on course, then those of you in the boardroom will have to start revising your budgets. We'll have to see whether at the end of the day the provisions that you made for bonuses ought to be revised, whether or not your shareholders will keep you there because you promised them a certain amount of profitability, and at the end of the day, it's not being met because your cost is going up by an extra 5% of your previous cost that you budgeted. These are the things that we need to consider whenever the budgets are read. So in essence, what I'm establishing here is that the minister's hand as to whether the argument of whether the Fiscal Responsibility Act was necessary or not, whether or not we could have done this using the Public Financial Management Act, for me, it's not the debate now. The debate now is, if Mr. Minister is going to miss his 5% and his job is going to be on the line, subject to Parliament accepting him, and the fact that in 2020 we are going for elections, so touching the expenditure side is not really an option as we have done in the past 2 years, then we need to brace ourselves up for either enforced tax compliance or for new taxes. So having established this context, what is the government's direction on taxes as far as 2019 is concerned? And why is this important for those of you who sit in the boardroom? The government is saying that compared to 2018, tax revenues is expected to go up by 20%. Where is that money going to come from? That money will definitely come from you and it will come from myself. And therefore, we need to know what government intends to do. My senior colleague have already explained that some of the things that government intends to do in 2019 is that, one, GRA is going to be reformed. A lot of my colleagues that I know at the GRA have been transferred. What does this mean? If you had a friend there where you were calling because you were not doing the right thing and because Ghanaians are relatively kinder than in other countries that I've worked in, maybe he can help you to sort out some things properly or improperly, I don't know. But 2019, your chances of getting that done has been reduced because they have been transferred. Some have been moved here and some have been moved to another place. Two, we talked about the issue about prosecution and distress action. So on the 3rd of January, if you run a Google search on the Daily Graphic website, GRA went on to prosecute or has sent 3 people to court for port-related tax evasions. So could this be a good start, or could this be just something that after 2 months we all need to close our mind and say, oh, it is business as usual? I don't know. The third thing that government is saying is that they will deepen digitalization. And as my senior colleague has said, the electronic or the physical electronic device has been passed into law now, pending when GRA is ready to hit the ground running. Essentially, what this would mean is that when I come to you and I procure a vatable service or a vatable good, it means that you would not be required to issue those manual invoices as the norm, but rather as the exception. Going forward, when you do your VAT-related transactions, when you issue your VAT invoices, by the close of the day, the revenue should have an idea of how much VAT you should have charged and how much VAT you should be expecting. So as somebody who sits in the boardroom, are you ready to integrate the physical electronic devices with your existing accounting packages? These are the questions that you need to be asking. 4 is the issue about TIN enforcement. And in the past, the revenue has threatened that when you come to me to pay your withholding tax, when you come to me to pay taxes that you have withheld on others, if you do not complete the form properly, I would disallow or I would not accept your forms. Which that will therefore mean is that the payment that you would have probably made, you may be denied from making that payment. Now, under the laws of Ghana, if tax is due and you fail to pay the tax on the day that is due, it is deemed that the Society of Ghana has granted you a loan. And of course, when you grant somebody a loan, you charge interest. So the question is, what is that interest rate? So that interest rate now is the Bank of Ghana monetary policy rate plus 85%. So yesterday, the Bank of Ghana governor revised, or based on the monetary policy committee meeting, revised the rate down to 60%. A quarter of 16% gives us 4%. So which means that if you delay in paying taxes, 20% of that is the annual tax interest that comes on that. So if you sit in the boardroom and I'm the shareholder and I need money for capital investments and you are using the money to pay the government of Ghana interest on delayed taxes, I'll have to check whether or not to keep you as a board member. So these are the questions that we need to be asking. Is this issues all going to be on enforcement? No. Government says that going into 2019, I'm going to give some exemptions. So if I'm going to review the exemption regime, we have always had in our laws for some time now that if you engage in low-cost housing, I will give you a tax concession. So while some people are paying 25% corporate tax, you may have to pay 1% corporate tax for 5 years. So the question is, if I'm a board member and I have excess funds, maybe it's about the time that I monitor whether government is indeed going to put in place a proper policy for us to know what is a low cost housing, and how I can channel my extra funds into that area to generate a lot of shareholder value. In addition, government is saying that, look, in as much as I wish to relook at the exemptions regime, I introduced or I planned to introduce something called the 1D, 1F. On this 1D, 1F campaign promise, you voted for me. It's been about 2 years. I need to push this agenda forward. So I have gotten cabinet to approve certain concessions for the 1D, 1F program. However, as far as the laws of Ghana are concerned, all that cabinet has done is to express a wish. If you wish to introduce a new tax or to give concessions, you must bring it to the people you and I voted for on the 7th of December in the Sun to agree whether or not that would be given. So yes, the concessions have been thought about in cabinet. It ought to go to Parliament for Parliament to say, look, we expect to raise 58 billion in revenue. If we give these concessions, we may not be able to raise it. Or if we give these concessions, we will employ a lot more people, and then now the 30% tax rate will generate a lot more revenues for us. So as board members or as people thinking of getting onto the board, these are some of the things that we should be looking at as far as the 2019 is concerned. One other thing that government proposed to do, so just in case you work for a mining company or you sit on the board of a mining company, which I think will be a lot of challenge for government, is that government is saying, if I grant you exemptions, I'm going to convert that exemption into holdings in the company. Now, if you pick the typical balance sheet of a mining company, don't be surprised that a whole mining company can have capital less than $10,000. Now, if you're going to be converting my exemptions into holdings in the company, then it's not a little government will have actually taken over a mining company that was being set up. We think this will be a very big challenge. We don't think it's currently in line with the Companies Act, and a lot of work will have to be done. But even what constitutes exemptions anyway? I don't even know. So the debate around this, obviously, when it gets to Parliament, will be talked about. The other issue around shifting the withholding tax rates from the previous point to export. Obviously, if I sit as a board member of such a company, I should be excited, because the question is, it will actually amount to an increased exemption for tax purposes. Why do I say this? If somebody buys from a mining company, from a small-scale miner, and the person is required to withhold 3%, and now you're going to shift it from that point to the point of export, then the natural question that happens is, what of that gold is not exported? Does that mean that person gets an automatic exemption from taxes? These are the questions that we need to ask. And why those sitting on the board or those who intend to sit on the board have to be so much interested in this is because of what happened on July 2018. And we never know what will happen in July 2019 if the revenue targets are being missed. Moving on from this, what are the tax policy measures? Remember I said, what the minister read to Parliament as far as the 2019 budget is concerned, when it comes to tax, they are mere wishes. You need to go back to Parliament if those changes will require a change in law. So what are the things that the minister promised, which ought to be legislated, and which of these have been legislated? The first is what my senior colleague and the doctor from the ministry talked about. The government said, look, I have listened to the people of Ghana. The people of Ghana are crying that the 35% rate is high. So let us bring it down. We have listened and we have brought it down to 30%. The truth of the matter is that the 35% brought down to 30% is still worse than what the 25% used to be. So if you are a board member and you are looking at how your tax position is going to be, even if you don't increase salaries for 2019, expect your tax bill for 2019 as far as employment tax is concerned to be higher than 2018. Because previously you had an uncapped 25. Now you're going to have a trigger coming in at 20,000 at 30%. So don't think your tax bill will drop. It's actually going to go up. So monitor that. My senior colleague also talked about the issue around textiles. So just in case you sit on the board or you are working for a textile company in Ghana, the law for this has now been passed. It is Act 980. And what it says is that if you are a manufacturer of textiles and you have the approval of the ministry or the minister responsible for trade and industry, when you sell, it should be zero rated. So if you import to resell, that does not affect you. This affects qualifying manufacturers. And the period is going to be for a period of 3 years. In other words, up to the end of 2021. So we would expect that ordinarily, either prices are cut back by the effective bit of the VAT, or we have enough more money to invest in capital expenditure or to employ a lot more. So for those in the textile industries, look at that. The other thing that we need to know has happened in the textile space is that, unlike as my senior colleague was saying that he was not going to drink the water if he doesn't have stamps, the textile industry people were asking for stamps. They were saying that we have tried taking imported pirated products and bent them. It seems this is still not working. So now, for every 6 yards of clothes, let us take a stamp on it, so that we will know that this one has been properly tracked, either by the government as produced locally, or when you import these items, still have them embossed with stamps. So please, let's take note. And just in case some of you are doing side business, apart from what you do in your companies, please, as soon as this law is properly being enforced, ensure that you have tax stamps before, as he said, what happened to a reputable hotel happens to your materials. We don't know whether government will seize them and give it to those who need those stuff or otherwise. We don't know what will happen. So, by way of my last comments, and by way of ensuring that you have demonstrated due care as a board member, so that just in case your company is being held responsible for tax non-compliance, you are safe, I want to quickly run through the following checklist. 1. At the end of 2018, did your projections that you gave to the Ghana Revenue Authority materially differ? So the question you may ask is, what is materially differ? Materially different means that you told the Commissioner General you're going to pay 100 Ghana cedis. At the end of the day, you realize that, my projections are actually more than 10% of that. So if you did not do it, you've already fallen foul of the law, and you're going to be subject to that 25% markup interest that I talked about. So if your year end was 31st December, please, when you go back, if you're a board member, go and ask the CFO, how did our projection go, and did we submit a reposition to that Commissioner General? The second issue is that when you engage an employee, even though PAYE is also a withholding tax, it is a special withholding tax. So what that basically means is that as far as employment tax is concerned, you are responsible for ensuring that the annual tax liability is accurately determined. What does that mean? What this means is that if you engage any person who is in your establishment by 31st December 2018, you must have assessed the employment tax liability of that person and paid the balance to GRA by the 15th of January. Today is already 29th. So if you didn't do the annual tax liability, now I have told you, and then you have gotten to know, so it's going to be a defense for you going forward if you ensure you do the right thing. So please, if your CFOs did not do the annual recon, you have already exposed the company. Just to tie this to rates, in 2013, there was an election petition in this country. So even though as at that time I was out of this country on secondment, I was still monitoring because home is home. And our current vice president, anytime he went to court and you ask him to prove his claims, he tells you clearly, it is the pink sheet I am using because you and I were not there. In the same manner, when you are running your business, the Commissioner General is not there with you. The only way the Commissioner General will place a bit of comfort on what you have done is that sign your own quote-unquote death warrant on the return, tell him that the return is true, and then submit it to him to vet. So, what does this really mean? The Commissioner General, in April, so 30th April 2019, would expect that you will submit all those who have engaged in the previous year, sign it off, and when he checks and it's not correct, he can come back and tell you that you did not tell him the truth. And then the relevant thing that my assessments would happen. And just ask what he said. If I hold you right now and say that you are a criminal, the law requires me to prove that you are a criminal. However, so the tax authority can come and tell you that you are a criminal, and then you now need to prove to the tax authority that I am not a criminal. So it's a bit difficult than a case whereby you need to prove. And of course, those of you listening to the media this morning or to the radio, you've already heard about the Midland woman's issue, and whether or not it was indeed the case that she was being called and she was not coming, because the lawyer of the woman said it is not true. But what am I establishing here? The burden of proof of principal taxes rests on you. However, if the Commissioner General raises an interest or a penalty is correct. So please take note of that. Take note of the fact that by April 30th, if you had a 31st December year end, you need to submit the company's own pin sheet to the Commissioner General to vet. In the unlikely event that maybe you can't meet that date, you can make an application for a 60-day maximum extension. However, that 60-day maximum extension does not apply to the day you should have paid your tax. So the people of Ghana will demand their 25% uplift. So now you can be working about 20% on that particular stuff. Now, if there's nothing at all that we've gotten to know, we now know that there's something called related parties, right? From this bank issue that we had. So you have this company, you are the same board member, you are this, you are that. You may tie these companies into what we call a related party group. The Commissioner General says, if you have done related party-related activities, submit a special return to me. And for those of you who are hearing this for the first time, this law has been in place since 2000. The regulations to this law was passed in 2012 by Parliament, or was allowed to come in force in 2012. So from 2013 to 2019, you do the subtraction and see. If you've never complied, then the GRA may be coming after you. So, in brief, this is what I wish to share with you as board members and as potential board members. When you get into those boardrooms, tax should no longer be the issue left for just those at the tactical level. It is a strategic issue. Thank you very much.
And the presentation has been very well delivered, very insightful, almost station. We would like to acknowledge the presence of the President, Institute of Directors, Ghana, and the person of Mr. Roxon Rebecca, who is in the house. We also like to appreciate the presence of corporate institutions, academia, finance houses, print and electronic media, and then our own photo masters who's doing photo and video coverage for us. So in the house is Bureau Ventures Limited. We have UPSA, Graphic Corporation, Profile, Gold Street Business, Microfinance Consult Limited, Ghana Revenue Authority, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ghana Hotels Association, KPMG, The Bridge Media, BRA and Associates. Shall we humbly invite the last presenter to do for us investment opportunities, looking at all the scary things we've had. There's always a good side to everything. How can we safely invest? Where do we invest? What should we be mindful of? Must we invest at all? Do we like it for the time? Let's put our hands together for Mr. Robert Jadu.
Thank you for the invitation. I hope you can see me because of the light. But I was looking at Abeku and I was looking at the height. Maybe that's what it takes to be in consulting and practice. Let me start by saying that I have my colleague from our advisory technology side, digital as well, in the person of Sam Aluko, who is also here, from KPMG. I think that let me issue some caveats up front, i.e., given the circumstances we find ourselves in this country, particularly in the financial services sector, my presentation should not be construed as investment advice. Let me say it again. It is not investment advice. I.e., if you want to follow up on an opportunity as presented here, we always encourage that you do proper due diligence, understand what the dynamics are in a particular industry of interest to you before you pursue it. And I think that's very, very important because I don't want anybody saying that this guy from KPMG, looks like a men's school guy. Starting to say things that I followed up on and it turned out to be. Definitely, thank you for taking that advice seriously. Maybe let's move to my slide. Okay. So is this. So in terms of outline, it's what are the priority sectors, and Dr. Mauli Gada has actually touched on all the specifics in the budget, and of course Abeku as well, and the GRA. So we'll then look at sectors from a growth perspective, because that's important in terms of opportunities for investment, and then also beyond the budget, other things that we should pay attention to, and then of course what are some of the concluding thoughts that we have from KPMG perspective. I think this statement was quite well captured in both. Sorry, you can't hear me. My voice is that we are building a 1,000-year economy based on infrastructure, and I think that's important, infrastructure and industry, priority areas. And I think that's really something that we should pay attention to. What we've done, and I guess these are the strategic priority areas of government, so industry, infrastructure, agriculture, mobilization of revenue, and the rest. Priority areas, right? 2017, and I'm conscious of the fact that we are talking about 2019 budget. But if we then look at the theme 2017, 2018, and then 2019, there's something that runs through. Okay, so we thought we would share that. One is seeds for growth and what? Jobs. Look at 2019, stronger economy for jobs and prosperity. And there are a number of flagship programs the government has identified. I don't speak for government. But we all saw the budget, and there are specific areas of focus. So 3 SHS, we know 1 district, 1 factory, and I'm not going to the details of how these are being executed. But clearly a number of areas. And so the first thing maybe an investor or somebody who has money to invest should be looking at is, where is government actually directing its effort? What are the priorities for government? Where are the areas that money is going? And then first advice is follow the money. Right? Government is the biggest spender and driver of economic activity, at least in our part of the world. And therefore, these are the areas. The railway sector seems to be one of the key areas. So if you think about railways, beyond construction, there are a number of things that happen. Even the laying of the steel, all the things that happen, that should drive economic activity. And I suspect this will be running through a number of communities. So if you look at the communities around some of the railway lines, we should expect economic activity and therefore potential investment opportunity areas for all of us. I won't go into the detail of those priority sectors. So it's agreed, we know that there's planting for food and construction of dams. Now, I believe that government is creating, or the intention is to create the environment so that private sector can then take advantage. So if there's construction of dam, and we know a certain number that's supposed to be constructed in a number of areas, and you have the finances, then clearly if you approach government, there should be an opportunity there for you. If you take infrastructure, and I've talked about a few of them, definitely the railway sector, road construction, key. Now, we know that a number of trunk roads or big projects are coming up. If you look at Tema motorway today, and even the stretch of the motorway, the expansion is a key, if you like, investment opportunity. I know that there has been some back and forth on it, but if you look at the number of vehicles that pass through the motorway every day, someone estimated it to be about 38,000 or so, I'm not sure. But if that is it, if you construct that motorway, assuming you win the bid, and everybody's paying 1 cedi or maybe 50 pesos every day, 38,000 cars. If you work the mathematics or the arithmetic, over a certain time period, if you are building, operating, and possibly transferring, definitely that's an opportunity. If you take Accra, Takra Digitalization, that's a big project. And then, of course, you have the Western Rail, Eastern Rail, Paga, Kumasi Paga, quite a number of those infrastructure projects. And I think areas that we need to pay attention to. If you take industry, industrial parks, again, that's a key area. What government, we understand, is planning to do is to facilitate. Land acquisition is always a challenge, and even getting certain social amenities to those areas are always a challenge. So government's intention is to say, how can I create that environment for you? And you can build the industrial park. So from an opportunity perspective, that is something that definitely we should pay attention to. I think this slide for us tells us a story. Allocations, some of the allocations in some key areas in terms of the budget, and the increment that we've seen. If you take infrastructure, for example, about 156% increase in allocation towards infrastructure, which gives a focus about doing that. If you take education, a 39% jump in terms of the budgetary allocation towards education. Again, it gives us a sense that there will be a lot of spending in that area. So if we're supplying goods and services, for example, around this corridor or sector, education, then clearly you should position yourself for some of that allocation. If you take hospitals or health sector, quite a number of hospitals to be upgraded, particularly in Western region. And then, of course, I've seen one in Volta region, I think Hawkware Municipal Hospital to be upgraded to a regional status. You have cheap compounds and a number of those projects that are coming up. So if you're in construction, again, these are opportunities that we should pay attention to. If you take a break, and I've talked about break, the understanding we have is African Development Bank has set aside some funding to support that particular sector. So if you take trade, the industry, apart from the $307 million allocated from an expenditure perspective, about $1 billion is to be raised by that sector. And there are a number of initiatives that will be driving that. So one district, one factory, again, my understanding is so far, as of last year, we had about 79 or so, 55 to 79. The figures keep changing. But clearly, if you have identified an opportunity in a district that you come from, and you think that clearly there's an opportunity there to invest in other capital, clearly we should be looking at. This slide is looking at the various sectors of the economy and saying over the years, how have they performed from a growth perspective, and then also their contribution to GDP. So on the vertical axis, we've looked at the growth rates of the various sectors, and across the the horizontal axis, what is their contribution, or the right is the contribution to GDP. And what we've done is to say, if we have this as wave one, these are the sectors that have the greatest contribution to GDP in our economy. And if you look at the growth rate as well, not bad. So manufacturing, you have crops, if you like, will be crops, mining and quarrying, manufacturing, trade, and construction. If you then go to the second wave, which is the yellow one, you have, if my color description is right, oil, and then you have financial services, But interestingly, we then have looked at the budget 2019, and government is forecasting growth in certain sectors. So we're asking ourselves, how would the future look like? And that's this slide here. So we've looked at those sectors based on the projections that government is making. Where will the growth come from? And again, you will find that mining, that was, if you look at mining, mining was in the second position here. That has shifted to possibly the first from a growth perspective and also bubble size perspective. You'll find that oil has moved to, if you like, we've gone with a good growth rate and also contribution to GDP. So for us, the size of the bubble, which is contribution to GDP, tells us the level of activity or business activities that will be happening in those sectors. So if you're an investor or a business owner, these are sectors that you need to pay attention to. Of course, you have financial services highlighted that which has dropped significantly. And at this point, people would say that, well, the sector is not doing well, I want to keep my money. I think there's a slide here that maybe we should look at. And there's a quote there from Warren Buffett. That be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy only when others are fearful. From an investment perspective, he's one of the guys who can read the market. And we know that in 2011, he put about $5 billion into Bank of America and Merrill Lynch. And at the time, the markets were not doing well. Today, if you check how much he owns and how much that has translated into, he's made huge gains. Now, I'm not saying that's something we should follow, but financial services may not necessarily be doing. So if you have liquidity, which is the biggest challenge that most of the banks and microfinance and every investment houses have now, and you are an investor and you have the liquidity, possibly some of the opportunities. I won't bore you with the stories here. 9 banks consolidated, some merged, others done, reclassified, not done. Finally, it means that there will be exit. Would have an opportunity to buy into some shares. And if we go by the assumption that these banks being recapitalized are actually solvent and have good corporate governance, so they really don't have challenges, then it means 5 years from now, if we do the right things, there may be an opportunity. Okay. Now, if we took the insurance sector, just this morning or yesterday, there's a talk about a 233% increase in capital. Do you believe that all the insurance companies, about 49 of them, will be able to raise the capital and recapitalize? Would there be an opportunity for consolidation? Would there be an opportunity for some of them trying to raise that capital, and therefore if you have capital, you could get an opportunity there? Again, something to pay attention to. We know that the microfinance and savings and loan sector will have to be transformed. There may be things in there to look at as well. So if you look at the budget 2019, definitely sectors that will grow, sectors that will make contributions to the economy. Financial services may be not doing so well, but I'm not sure. But are there challenges if you are an investor? If you look at, we carried out the KPMG pre-budget survey. We do that every year. So we speak to, if you like, stay awake issues that concern them. And the market confidence is number 1 today, or at the time that we took this data. That's sometime in November, just before the budget. Number 2 is CD depreciation. So if I'm an investor and I have capital today and I put it in, and I'm bringing this from outside, how will the CD impact me? Utility and fuel costs. So again, the environment and macro dynamics may be looking good, but there are areas that clearly need to be addressed as well. if you look at the percentage of respondents that believe that the tax environment is challenging to them, it's quite high. So clearly, there are areas that require attention. From an investment perspective, you really want to pay attention to some of the challenges that you would face as an investor. What we've done here, and I think one of the presenters mentioned, that Ghana has improved on the World Bank doing business ranking. So we're 120, now we are about 140. We've improved by 6 points, if you like. Clearly, there are specific sectors that they measure. So if you look at this, areas that we've really improved in the dealing with construction permits, and I'm sure Mr. Nubega would actually have inputs and more explanation to that in terms of contribution. But also getting electricity, we have significantly improved in those areas. But there are other areas from the World Bank perspective that if you are investing in the Ghanaian economy or doing business here, that may be challenging. I think that from an investment perspective, if you have capital today or you run a business as a director, there are key things that we need to pay attention to. The fact is that the need of people is changing. And I guess most of us are familiar with this hierarchy of needs. Management theory 101, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological, social. Today, the truth is that the number one need for anybody is battery power. Sometimes when you do presentation like this, where people choose to sit depends on where the plug is, so they can plug their phones. And Wi-Fi, access to the internet on the go, very critical. So if you're an investor, given this is the dynamics or where we are today from a digital perspective or technology perspective, technology is driving everything. If you are going to optimize costs, given that cost and utility costs are key challenges that businesses face, then your business model must incorporate digital. Because that's an opportunity to save costs, but it's also a disruptive move or trend or mega trend that we see. If you don't do it, your business will be taken over as an investor. And that's very, very critical for those of us here who are directors. What can we automate? What can we save costs on? And how do we leverage digital to do that? Very, very key. So, in conclusion, our thoughts, we think that the Ghanaian economy from an investment perspective based on the budget is projected to grow, which is a good thing, again, against where we are coming from. Definitely, we will be impacted depending on what happens in the external economy, particularly in the US. If portfolio investors decide to move funds, which they do, that just puts pressure on our cedi, our local currency. And we are experiencing that in terms of the depreciation of the cedi. And the best gauge of the cedi's movement is not the Forest Bureau, per liter. It shows you what's happening in the Forest Bureau. Our view is that the financial services sector reforms and some of the challenges that we've had may be over from a banking perspective, from a regulatory action perspective, but then we finance houses that we need to pay attention to as well. But clearly, building a 1,000-year economy is not an easy thing. And infrastructure, industrialization, and of course, sustainability of what we consume will be critical. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to do that for us will be the panel made up of all our speakers, plus the President Institute of Directors Ghana. As they come up here, we'll pass round some pieces of paper. If you have a need, you can write down your question or just raise your hand. We'll bring you the microphone, then you can ask the questions.
My name is Vincent Agbenyega, final year MBA Corporate Governance, EPSA. So, my first question has to do with to Mr. Native from GRA. I want to find out what is the standard time for someone to get a tin, because this will also serve as a feedback to you from those who are consumers of your product. One thing I've realized is that for you to get a tin, it has taken somebody more than 6 months for him to get it. A taxi driver who has been taking me around and advising that he should get a tin. So he said, where can he get it? So I took him to the one at Okpolo. He went there, and he has been following for the past 6 months. The guy has given up. So I want to find out what is the standard time, and also whether the banks and the various institutions who have been tasked not to provide services to non-tin members, whether they are still enforcing it. Equally, I have a lawyer friend who I want to actually open a company, and I want him to be a director. But because he doesn't have the team, he has also been moving to the tax office up to now.
So the question is?
Yes, my question is, what's the standard time? And then the final one has to do with the small-scale miners. I actually want to find out what was the rationale into giving them, like some of them, they'll be given, they'll only be asked whether they are paid tax at the point of export. I think that there's so much gap that there are so many people who are going to evade tax. So if the authorities can do something about it, thank you.
I will take the responses.
Yes, I see a hand here. And then another there. Okay.
My name is Daniel Nas, final year. Mine has to do with Ministry of Finance and GRA. When you look at the ECOWAS protocol, there's a loophole. Most of us, or most people, are taking advantage of. For instance, a vehicle can be brought in from Nigeria and other neighboring countries, which they are supposed to pay so much on that vehicle if they are supposed to clear those vehicles from our ports. They exploit this loophole, enjoy the ECOWAS protocol, bring the vehicles into the system, which they are supposed to enjoy some number of days. For some time to come, you see the vehicles with Nigerian or other foreign number plates. After 30 days or 1 month, you see the vehicle with a Ghanaian registration number. Further checks will tell you that they have found their way illegally to register the vehicles in Ghana, and they don't pay any revenue to the government of Ghana. So what is GRA and Ministry of Finance doing about this very issue? Thank you very much.
I've learned a lot from all of you. My question goes to GRA, Mr. Neti. We've had a lot of, and it's good that you're using laptop, etc., to widen the tax net. But I realized that for years, the tax net has been so small. I mean, it's the same people over and over again. How do we get the illiterates, for example, to pay tax? You have so many people in the market space. In fact, I have a personal friend who is an architect. He doesn't have a bank account. He says, I do not believe in keeping a bank account. He does a lot of work for people on a personal basis. How do we get such a person to pay tax? He doesn't travel often, so he doesn't need a team to, travel, do that. So I think there's more that we need to do to widen the tax scope and to widen the tax net. You know, there's so many people doing business out of the corporate lives, and it's always the same corporate people who have to pay and go up to 35% for their PAYE. I think that there's a lot more to do, and I'd like you to talk about other ways that we can really widen the tax net. Property tax, for example. For years, we've been wondering how we can even get a bill to pay our property tax. And I know there are companies in the ICT vein who are trying to do these things, help to automate things like property tax, etc. And yet they are not getting the leeway. And one of our budget things is that we want to widen the entrepreneurship skills. So I think that people also who have the capabilities should be given more opportunities to serve the country, and it will help us collect the 45 million that we're talking about. Thank you.
Yes, when it comes to the standard time, I want to read from the Revenue and Treasury Act, Section 13, issue of taxpayer identification number. The Commission General may issue a taxpayer identification number to an applicant within 21 days of receiving an application. So within 21 days, that's what the law is saying. So sometimes you go to our office, they will say it should be in a month. In a month's time, you will get it. But what the Commission General has directed is that within 48 hours, it doesn't want to hear that somebody is complaining. But we have issues coming with because the system that we are using to generate the thing, when there's a lot of transactions, it's slow. But Commission General is working with the partners to ensure that the system is able to work quickly and faster. We have people who come over the weekend even after 6 o'clock to work to ensure that the applications are dealt with so that the team is generated for officers. So by the law, it's 21 days. But the Commission General wants it to be done within 48 hours. It should be done. So things are being put in place. If an institution deals with you, it comes to this knowledge and it deals with you without a team, you will have to answer to it. So we are putting this in place to ensure that the team are generated quickly and everybody gets it. Please, for your colleague, the taxi driver, it always comes to that. Let me know the details and I'll follow up and then see how best you can resolve it. Always we say that, but we want to ensure that the system works across. And please, if you have any officer of the GRA demanding one person for the generation of things, I'm going to deal with them. It's free. Nobody should demand any money from anybody for the generation of time. Please. And if you have any issues, go and see the office manager. After you talk to the officer, and he says that we must do something and something will happen, ask for the office manager. Otherwise, try and get the name of the officer, and then let it get to the president who will deal with such ones. We don't want anybody to jeopardize this generation.
Yeah, Mr. Knight, this is a follow-up to your response. That people can go and then, take up issues about delayed issuance of...
Yes, names given to him so that when he deals with it, that he doesn't want any middle, but to make that telephone number. But for now, the service that is not working too well. We want to make sure that the names goes to him directly and have it resolved.
So if I have a problem, I go to the commissioner himself. Is that your submission?
I'll make the service that the telephone numbers are available. Okay. And I want to confirm those numbers so that you can call and make sure. You see, sometimes informants, we don't want the names to be spread out. We want it to be restricted to a few people to ensure that it's dealt with. Somebody may take the number or take the details and we know what to do. I want to ensure that that is done. Or we'll make those numbers available. With regards to the small scale, yes, it has been a big problem dealing with that industry. And you know what has happened, the illegal mining that has gone on. And a lot of I remember Abeku indicated something that if somebody does not export, he's able to pay the 3%. Yes, but when you look at the percentage of the consumption locally, it's very, very small, less than 5%. Most of it is going out. So that's how we want to try and ensure that we are able to capture them. So for now, we are starting at this level. And we know that with time, we'll be able to spread it out to ensure that those miners themselves pay us something. But for now, we are limiting it to those who are exporting, and therefore we'll try to deal with that. With regards to vehicles, it is true that some vehicles, when they come from Togo and they enter after the expiry date, by the time you realize it is registered. And what we are trying to do is to that, the registration time at EDA, and we have customs. What we have to do is to step up our game there. Before the person is able to register, he needs to ensure that he checks out with customs, because there's customs there to find out whether the vehicle has been registered. So we need to draw the attention to the fact that there's still leakage, and therefore we must not allow said vehicles that have gone beyond the 90 days as required by ECOWAS protocol is really have the taxes paid. But apart from that, we have officers who are also going around and then looking at vehicles. And even though it's registered, they are able to detect, but they are not a lot on the field. But they are able to detect that some of these vehicles are not registered, and then they are picked out to ensure that the import duty and import VAT is paid. When we come to TaxNet, yes, I do agree that there are a whole lot of people out there who are not paying anything at all. We have a lot of, we are engaging them. The market women, we are having meetings with them, Guta, just trying to meet up with them to find out how best we can get them to pay some tax, because they claim to be illiterates. But we know that when you go there, you have graduates and all that who are in there making lots of money. So we are engaging these groups, these market women and all this, to find out how best we can get them to pay something to the state. And coming to the professionals, in fact, sorry to say, the professionals are giving us a lot of problems. They are the ones not paying the taxes, the professionals. Lawyers, accountants, like my brother here, he pays that. All of them I'm checking. Architects, surveyors. Even go to relate the Ghana Bar Association. And we told them that if they renew the license of their members, they should ensure that one have tax clearance certificate. And that's what the law is saying. So the Commissioner General has written to all these associations to ensure that all these associations, whether architects, surveyors, accountants, and all these people, if you are going to renew your license to practice for the year, you must have a team, and then have a TCC, tax clearance certificate, to ensure that, so that you also help us. Once you have it, then you have the moral right to tell somebody that you should have it, or you should pay your tax, isn't it? Yeah, so those are the kinds of engagements we are having to ensure that the tax net is widened. Otherwise, people can take advantage of the system and then try to abuse the system. So we'll give them some identification. You demand it, you have to see it before you engage with him or her. When it comes to the property tax, as I indicated, is the local government, the MMDs, the district assemblies who are really in it. But by law, the Commissioner General is also to provide advice and assistance in doing that. In fact, there are a lot of engagements going on where we are using GPS. I mean, they are taking pictures of areas and then trying to identify and number the houses. Now we have the GPS, where we are trying to ensure that every house has an address. But there are pictures being taken, there are pictures being taken, and then it is given to the couple. So, for instance, British Council area, they are good. That's what they go to. They're not just for only registration, but identifying residents and commercial stores and all that, so that we are able to identify them, and then they do the proper property rate taxes are collected. So all these things will come to play between this first and second quarters, and then we will ensure that you also help us in intensifying compliance. Thank you very much. I have my colleagues here, Thomas and then Yusuf. So if I do something else, they can also contribute. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll take another round of.
I work with Bureau Ventures Limited. I have 3 questions. The first to GRA. First one is on withholding tax. We deal with a lot of large companies when usually you deduct withholding tax from their payments. They will supply the goods to the face value of the amounts you are paying, and they will not accept the withholding tax certificates that will even be generated by GRA to them. And if you want them to supply to that value, you still have to pay that extra amount. I can give you main example like especially the cement producers. They don't accept it. And that always gives a lot of challenge so that our cost of production goes up. So we want to know what is the procedure or the law guiding that particular action. Then the second is on VAT. Government from VAT so that you don't charge VAT to government. And where it is not stated, that's supposed to be treated by the companies who are going to provide the construction service to government. Do we charge it or we don't? I'll read from KPMG. I'll be glad if we can have some breakdown on the figures you gave us for the various sectors. For example, if we take the trade and industry, we have about 307 million to be spent on industrial parks and all those. Do we have some breakdown of the various sectors under those items where they are likely to spend those values on? So under health, the 6.1 billion, are they all, I know some may be going to the development of the hospital, some may go into other purchases of equipment. If there is any breakdown that can guide us, I'll be grateful for us to receive that. Thank you.
Tax on luxury vehicles. And people come talking about what is determined by a luxury vehicle. For example, my uncle has an older Pathfinder. The Pathfinder, very old, he's been using for the past 10 years with an engine of 3.5. And he hardly uses that car. Once a while when he's going for funeral or church, he uses that one. And has also a smaller car he uses around all the time. He wanted to go and register this, he wanted to go and have a roadworthy for this older vehicle. And because of that, determined as luxury.
So the question is what? What is the definition of luxury? Is that the question?
Yes.
We find out. So we take it from here.
I made an observation that there's certain kind of compliance that comes willingly and freely when people understand the issues and why they need to do certain things. And I've also observed, having been an economics teacher before, how difficult it is for people to understand some of these economic jargons, GDP, deficit, and all those. And we know that the greater majority of the populace are illiterate. How can we break down these issues in the budget to the average market woman so that they would understand their bits of the contribution to the economy? I know some education goes on, but it's not enough. Can we flood our phones with audios, TV, radio, for people to understand why they need to contribute their quota? Thank you.
I want to understand what is happening, but what the law is clear. When you are making the payment, you have to remove whether goods, services, or works, depending on the rates that are paid. So if somebody is, we've made a supply, and he is
is making the payments, he doesn't want you to be owed. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so Mr. Nate, my understanding to the question is that in some of the industries, for example, he gave cement manufacturers, if you want to buy from them, they are not happy to take, they are not happy to have the
tax bill.
Yes, exactly. And so if you do that, as demanded by law, they deduct that portion of the transaction from what you buy. So if you're going to buy $1,000 and you're holding the tax equivalent, they will take out the tax component of cement to be supplied to you. What are the remedies?
Look, you need to report it. I mean, you need to report it. I think sometimes education is important. You see, because he is done that, then he goes away with the taxes that he has to pay. You see, the taxes are held on account for the person. So if we are trying to make sure that set ones, those who are doing that, we have something from him, and later on we follow up to ensure that he accounts for the full. That's the concept, the principle. So if the person is not allowing it, I think we need to draw the attention of the agencies, general revenue authorities, so that we follow up and find out why he is not allowing certain things to happen. Yes, that's the way this can be.
So we assuming cement manufacturing industry.
We project it. My colleagues are that means the distributors, isn't it? Or which people? Or the manufacturers. Like, I don't want to mention it, the manufacturers.
Distributors, both. Is it both? All right, okay. So Mr. Nadia.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll quickly follow up. If our unit is the one who responds for monitoring, so once we'll pick it up and see what is up.
So the second question is about
budgets. Or any reduction. Now, if the product is not found in that exempt schedule, it is taxed out.
Okay.
Regards to education. Okay, he talked about GDP. So
yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, so the question with regard to understanding of the budget and education, I think that's
and the jargons,
I think that's a very fair comment. Indeed, we are aware that the budget itself is a very technical document and that it doesn't lend itself to general understanding. So, because of that, so I was just making reference to the issue of the understanding of the budget, and I indicated that it is true that the budget is a technical document and it's full of economic jargon. So, what do we do to bring it or to decode it and make it understandable? So, this is the budget statement. This what the minister reads in Parliament is what the minister normally reads is the abridged version. So we read it abridged. But we have translated this budget into about 6 or so local languages. We translated the budget statement into various local languages, at least the recognizable or the usable.
So where do we find those copies? Because I haven't seen it before.
Well, so if you go to Ministry of Finance website, you see the main budget statement, you see the various local versions, you see a number of infographics on the budget statement, and then we also do citizen budget as well. The citizen budget is in English, but it's made simpler. I mean, it defines what GDP means, what fiscal deficit means, and all that. Then we also do, community dissemination. So we go to, we go to selected communities, and then we do presentation and we explain the policies and programs in the budget. So it's a whole comprehensive package of dissemination that we, process that we have after each, budget year. But citizens.
So is there any program as to how you relay those programs? How do you, let the public know about those programs?
Yes, so I believe the media is yes. So immediately after the budget, we engage the media at various levels. So we invite financial reporters, we invite economic reporters, and then we introduce them to the budget so that they carry on the dissemination. That is at the media level. Then at the community level, or at the local level, we have we select some communities where we go, and then beyond that, then we have the translation into local languages. Then we have a citizens budget as well. Then then we also have various infographics. So we do a lot of investment into this.
So if you go on your website now, are you saying that when we Google what is the website, my friend? Where do we get the information? The infographics and all the reduced jargons and all of that.
Mr. Chairman, Ministry of Finance has one of the comprehensive websites in the public sector, www.mufm.gov.gh. One of the most usable comprehensive websites in the public sector.
Okay.
And all these documents, including even the budget submitted by the sector ministries, we call them the PPP, the program-based budget. They are there.
All right. So I see people writing. You want to relate that again?
Yes.
www.what?
www.mofeb, that is MOFEB.gov.gh.
All right.
Yes,
so we have 3 minutes to close.
I think your question was on the further breakdown of the various sector allocations. I don't have that, but I'm sure the minister's representative will be able to give you specifics.
Sorry, I could have answered that. There is a high level, numbers. The various breakdown is presented in this budget statement. So you take each sector, even according to ministry, first by economic classification. So we have infrastructure sector. Then if you take Ministry of Rules, all the rules that the ministry will construct are all listed and are costed, even in the areas, and all that. If there is any project such as rail, where exactly which line is provided and is costed. So you can actually track all the expenditures, where they are going, and how much government is committing, so that you can position yourself as to how to benefit from that. Yeah, thank you. So please try and visit the Ministry of Finance website. It is free on the website. It's there. Pick it and read it. Thank you.
Maybe just a small part of the vehicles that come to this country with a certain registration and then they metamorphosize into some Ghanaian. I think that we should, as a country, get to a point where we are able to report people. How many of us here would genuinely, knowing that somebody hasn't paid us and you have paid, will report the other person? And does GRA actually have a place where you can report, where you will not be victimized? I think that's where we need to move to, because believe you me, if somebody brings a vehicle into this country and doesn't pay tax, what it means is that the accidents we have on our roads, for the bad roads that we have, and for people we can't take care of in the hospitals, the person is not contributing, you are contributing. And I think that we need to get to that point where we are able to report people. I think the president said we should be citizens. I believe that's what it means.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we run out of time. Very 30 seconds, 1 minute. You have the floor. Please, can you run and give them the mic, please?
All right. It's not really a question. A colleague of mine who is a board of directors, a member of the board of directors, a search was done on the company, and it came out that he has 3 TIN numbers. He has 3 TIN numbers. So he was wondering how come, but he has 1. As that the one he knows, we were told that there are 2 other ones which he's even not aware of. So the 2 is in the system, and the one that he has is not even recognized in the system. So I told him to working with the team. And then when you said that government agencies are supposed to withhold from them, what about import duties? Do you pay taxes on import duties as well?
Okay, so to take any lingering questions that you didn't have the opportunity to ask. Madam President.
My name is company which is not registered in Ghana here. What is the procedure you need to take to pay your tax? And also, how does the government or GRA confirms that this is the actual amount that you are being paid? Thank you.
Okay.
So the thing, he said he had two other things.
Does it happen?
Yeah, maybe I'm just trying to find out how under what circumstances. It could be that he submitted one application, it did not go through, then he submitted another at another place, and then submitted another at another place. So all the people, because you cannot have, I don't know how, you see, before you get your thing, you need your ID. You see, and you need your biodata. And so once those things are captured in the system, what it means is that you cannot come back again and have another thing. So I'm just trying to find out how.
So you process.
Because it's not biometric. Is it biometric? It's not biometric. So somebody, you'll not be able to detect that the person has
come back again. You see, yeah, if you want to go back and look at it, I don't know how. One time, and then tell you, wow.
Yeah, so it's
a system. It's a system that will find us.
And then follow it through.
Yes. We'll go and get the detail. So there's this cleanup. We know people are using different IDs. You see, let me explain how the system works. The system asks for your mother's name. You see, because the feeling is that in Ghana, you have the name of your mom is quite different. You can have Kukumesa about 4 or 5, but your mother's will be different. So that is one check the system will do. Then you look at your ID. So there are a few things that are looked at to ensure that we don't have this, but it's possible because the system is a system thing. Then we regards to you said taxes on import duty. I didn't get that one. What were you trying to say? The what?
To withhold on import duties.
No, import duties are paid at the port. And it's customs that collects it. And customs is GRO is the state. So I don't know how we can withhold on import duty. I'm not too clear on that. Because import duty is. Now, please, your question, I didn't get. You said when a non-resident.
Outside. You work with a company outside Ghana, and how do you pay your tax? It's like you work from home, but with a company outside Ghana, how do you pay your tax? And how does the government also confirm that this is actually the amount that you are being paid?
So yeah.
Ghana. It's not registered here. Let's say.
So essentially, yes, those scenarios occur. So obviously, the first is that you have recognized that you are an employee of a foreign entity. So under our laws, because you are exercising employment in Ghana, broadly, where are you physically working, which is Ghana, you are subject to tax on your employment income in Ghana. So the next question that comes then is, how do you pay your tax? Now, under the tax laws of Ghana, only these two forms of companies can withhold PAYE on you. One, either that company is incorporated in Ghana, or two, that company has, in layman's terms, a branch in Ghana. In your case, let's assume your employer has none. It means that you need to self-assess yourself to tax and file your returns and pay your taxes accordingly. How would the GRA know? Now, in Ghana, we operate what we call a self-assessment scheme. So it is believed that you will do the right thing until the day of trouble comes. So you will be asked to submit your return, to pay your taxes, However, the Commissioner General can always request for further information. And since the 2015 Act came in force, the Income Tax Act actually amended the Banking Act of 2004 to say that the GRA can go to your bank to request for your statements. So previously they could go under confidentiality rules, but since then it has been amended and they can't do that. Subsequently, they're receiving a recent law now which deals with automatic exchange of financial information, which came into force in 2018. That act has also confirmed again that the Commissioner General can go to your bank. So if you are receiving the money through a bank, they would always demand to know whether or not what you are indeed claiming to be receiving is correct.
Okay, so I'll take, unfortunately, I think we'll have to rest here. I'm going to be around to take a few questions after we have closed. I'm sorry, I will give the floor to the panelists to give their closing remarks very briefly. Mr. Finance Minister.
Yes, so let me say that it is very refreshing to be here, and also to know that most of the issues have been focused on tax, and indeed, that is very refreshing because as we move into a lower, now we are in a lower middle income, we are a lower middle income country, and then as we consolidate and move towards an upper middle income or full middle income, it is very important to note that most of our aid that we receive from abroad will definitely disappear, and so we had to embark on what we call domestic revenue mobilization. And indeed, that is the reason why in recent time you'll be hearing GRA a lot, intensifying their ways of generating revenue, and also to indicate that payment of taxes, as my brother said, is a civil responsibility. In most jurisdictions, citizens run towards the tax authority to pay their taxes. If you operate in a virtual world, a virtual company, there is no way GRA are not, so to say, they are not God. They can't know what you do. So you have to be seen as doing the right thing, disclosing what you do, your taxable income, and pay your taxes. Then, of course, everybody, can go home and sleep in peace. But finally, I want to say that the Ministry of Finance, as part of the government agenda of jobs and growth, is open to suggestions, is open to discussions, is open to ideas, innovative ideas on how to first of all close the infrastructure gap, how to create new jobs for active youth from the universities, and all that. So if you have suggestions as to how to help us move the country forward, please feel free, walk to the ministry and talk to us, and I'm sure that is where we are there. So please, I want to thank you once again for the opportunity, and also to remind all of us that the only way we can move this country forward beyond aid is through domestic revenue mobilization. And there is nobody to do that for us, it is you and I. So let's be true to ourselves. Let's disclose our tax obligations. Let's disclose our tax liabilities. And let's pay what is due the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
PMG, we are grateful for the opportunity to be here. We've shared with you our thoughts around some of the sectors and allocations and growth prospects. I guess my advice remains the same. Please do proper due diligence wherever you are deciding to put your money. Business models are changing. Digital is key. Don't ignore that. And thank you again. Hopefully we've done a good job next time you invite us. Thank you.
At PwC, we are proud to say that our primary purpose continues to be solving the important problems of this country. And by way of concluding remarks, I would want to read something from Luke 3, 12 to 13. So some tax collectors came to be baptized, and they asked him, "Teacher, what are we to do?" This was to John the Baptist, and he responded, "Don't collect more than is legal," he told them. So this was the advice to the tax collectors. But it didn't end there, no. Romans 13:7. Pay promptly to all men what is due to them. Taxes to those to whom taxes are due. Toll to those to whom toll is due. Respect to those whom respect is due. Honor to those to whom honor is due. So I have finished my sermon. God bless us all.
I got to say. My boss has spoken, and scriptures have been read. Please let's be at that. Thank you very much.
Who patronize the program. Thank you very much for the sponsorship. On this note, I want to say a very big thank you to you. Membership of the Institute is open to every Ghanaian of sound mind. 2 membership routes, through training and direct membership. If we close and you're interested, let's talk to any of the people, or myself, or the MC who is the acting CEO of the Institute. On this note, I want to say a very big thank you for coming. Our next seminar is going to be at the end of the month. It's going to be on how we're going to leverage the media to promote and enhance good corporate governance. So look out for it. We'll also have a public lecture on what is good corporate governance. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for coming. Now I will have the mic to the MC to close us